Hi, my name is Erinn Renyer, and I teach cello here at Washburn University. Today we're going to go over the Kansas District and All-State Orchestra audition music. All right, here we are with the Andante of the Roman Carnival Overture by Berlioz. I think the most important factor with this piece is to make sure that you are being very even with your counting. I subdivide in eighth notes and put my metronome on eighth note equals 100 because you have a lot of rhythmic jumps between 16th notes, quarter notes, and half notes. The big issue, I think, most of all, is in measure 6, which is when you do the D to the high D shift. I have most students I find don't hold that D long enough. Make sure you count it all the way to 5. Also, don't feel like you have to hold that bowing all the way with the down bow with the eighths afterwards. That's more of a phrase marking. So do the tie on a down bow and then do the up bow starting on the C sharp. Also, when you're shifting up from D to D, make sure that you're pushing more on the D as the power, kind of like the power that pushes you up to the high D. Most people have fear of heights when they play, and so they tend to jam their hand forward. Really use the power of your bow. It's kind of like a payload with a rocket. You want to be big on your D here before you shift up to that D, okay? And then also, it's nice to do what we call a delayed shift, where you're actually doing the up bow for the shift and then change direction when you get to your destination. Or you could do it like where you do an up bow here and then you switch and actually do the shift on the down bow. So I'll show you the two different examples. There's an anticipated, which is this. But then you tend to run out of bow. So what I like to do is do a delayed shift where I actually change direction on my down bow, and then I make the shift, okay? And then what we would do is we'd call that ghosting the shift. You sweep, and then once you get to your destination, then you push and pull the rest of the sound. Be very rhythmic with your shifting in this large distance. You want to make sure you're thinking 1, 2, shift, and you'll have more success that way. Also, measure 2, we have left hand, in our left hand, we have a G sharp. When you're playing that portion there, you want to make sure you're really pushing off this E to make sure you can get yourself around for that G sharp. Because sometimes we fall short of that, so really push off the E so you're successful with that G sharp, okay? That's about it. Just be very lyrical and enjoy that excerpt. So here we are doing the Allegro vivace from the Roman Carnival Overture by Berlioz. This excerpt is kind of a stinker because it's fast, and articulation is difficult because of the unusual patterns with the repeated notes. My suggestion for you is when you're practicing it, you really have to just put in the work. The slow loop practice is the most effective way to do it. I would go ahead and start your metronome at around 80 and play slow and methodically with exaggerating the downbeats of the notes and then making sure that you're really using your finger articulation with your bow as opposed to a lot of arm motion. Now this isn't not as effective when it's under tempo, but let me show you what I mean. Rest. Let me do that again. So this is 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, ready, and 1. So you see how I'm really pulsing on that large beat, and then it's important as you grow with your velocity. So if I go up to around, say, 120, which is close to the tempo, you're going to notice that your up bows are going to get sluggish. So you really want to make sure that you're pushing on the up bow. Let me show you. And that wasn't quite with me. 1, 2, ready, and. So you hear how I'm pushing on that up bow more. But really, you should be going through this excerpt repeatedly from mark at 80 all the way up to 138. It takes just time and repetition for your body to memorize that muscle memory, and then also just really making sure that you're accenting the first and minimizing the non-essential notes. And then also, of course, when you're practicing performing this, you really want to make sure that you're feeling the pulse. It's kind of like when a runner has to do a 100-yard dash and they're in the runner's blocks and they have to take off just bolt out of their running blocks. This is the same type of thing where you have to feel the pulse and the rush of the pulse before you start the piece. So practice thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And do that several times through the different revolutions of tempo. Good luck. The Brahms Symphony No. 2 in D major, second movement. What a privilege it is for us cellists to be able to play the opening of this wonderful lyrical movement. Brahms has a special liking for cellists, and you can see that in reflection in his symphonies and other works. So the only stinker is that it's in the key of B. So hearing it sometimes is difficult, and having the right positioning is also a bit of a challenge. So my recommendation is go ahead and look at the fingerings that I have attached to this post and see if it's helpful for you to follow those fingerings. A lot of half positions, 3.5, 4.5 is helpful, so you're not doing excess shifting, especially with all the slurs that are integrated in this piece. One of the suggestions I would have for you also is to put yourself on a drone. You can find on Spotify or YouTube Cello Drone. If you type that in and put Cello Drone B, and then play with the drone, it'll really help you center to hear the piece as you're struggling through the different positions. Another thing that I would suggest is subdivision in eighth again, with putting your metronome at eighth note equals 84. So you're really making sure you're filling out your dotted quarter notes and your quarter notes and not cheating between the beats. Very important to have internalized pulse with this because it's a slow, steady work. Also, when it comes to bowing, you really, really have to be thinking what I call bow economy, saving on the slurs and spending on the separates. It puts you in better positioning for when you are having to sustain for a long period of time. With the left hand, really work on the energy of your left hand to make sure you're using vibrato to keep that phrase moving. Some other things I think is important is, for instance, the second line, second measure, making sure that you are getting momentum when you shift up to that high B. So you'll notice when we start with an up bow. I also start the piece with an up bow because I like the phrasing of it better, aiming towards the second and fourth beats, as opposed to starting with a big down bow and feeling weak where we need to have power. So just a suggestion, if your private teacher says the opposite, that's fine. It's just a perspective. But going back to the shift I was talking about here in the second line, so you want to make sure that you're getting that up bow But give a lot of power on the D sharp, so that allows you to get up to that high B. So that's really, really helpful. Also, when you're going to the next line, the third line between the first and second measures, when you do this area here, actually stop your bow before you shift up to that high B. It'll help you place it better. So those are just some tips for the Brahms, and wish you luck with it. So here we are with the Tchaikovsky Pathetique Symphony, second movement, a very famous cello excerpt, and what a delight to be able to play this. This is such a beautiful, fun, wacky waltz in 5/4 time, and lots of fun to play, but also there's a few spots where it gives us the heebie-jeebies, especially that big B to B and descending line on the second line. The third measure of the second line. Okay, advice for this. Well, it's more of a mental approach. You need to enjoy it. You need to be able to get to the point where you're really playing it and having fun with it. It's supposed to sound whimsical. It's not supposed to be serious. And sometimes that mental state will help you through the struggle of the glissando passage. So, piece of advice, first of all, typical practice, you want to be on a metronome, working either subdivision of eighth or quarter note. Slowly loop up so you can take it steadily from the get-go. Most of the time, we end up miscounting our dotted half notes, making them either too long or too short because we're not used to 5/4 time. So we really want to be diligent in making sure that you're counting your dotted half notes, because it does seem odd to change after the dotted half note. Another aspect that I think is really important is making sure your triplets are really clean in your articulation and the slurs, making sure they're nice and separate and not mushed together. Now, for the big thing to practice, besides looking at the fingerings that I've attached to this video for advice, and again, take those with a grain of salt. If your private instructor has better ideas, then that's great. But these are just for you, for your help. So I'm constantly changing fingerings, even my own part. So. But anyway, with the glissando, don't start with the big glissando. You can practice doing it. When you do, tuck your finger this way, not straight up. Maybe just practice going from the B to the A harmonic on the 1. And get your arm comfortable with that, and then eventually do the B. Okay? And then when you're doing that, for real, you want to make sure you're doing the payload again, the energy on the big B before you go up to the high B. Don't try to cram it because you're going to probably overshoot it. Now, the going down is the hard part. So instead of reading the music from left to right, let's do reverse section practice. So what I would advise you to do is actually start from the last position you play, which is the last 2 notes, and it's 4th position B and B flat. Get that comfortable first. Once you have that, you got it down. Then go back to the 2nd position, D, C sharp. Then after that, add the E flat. And then you're going to add the E before that, which is going to be a big down bow because you have to be able to preserve after that, right? And then you go with a separate up bow, F sharp. So forth and so on. if you practice it that way, what you're doing is you're mentally buttressing, which is a better way to learn than it is to go forward. That's a really effective way to practice. And then by the time you add the gliss, the stuff after the gliss is easy, which is what we want anyway, because that's really the more difficult challenge. So have fun with it. It's a great excerpt, and don't fear it. It's supposed to be whimsical. So best of luck. It was a pleasure to play and give instruction for you today. If you need any more help and want some guidance on something specific, feel free to reach out to me at erinn.renyer@washburn.edu. I'd be more than happy to meet with you, and we can go over specifics. And all we want to do is make sure that you have success. So best of luck.